All right, everybody, you're going to want to watch this video in its entirety. I'm going to get out of the way in a second, but just let me introduce it. There are so many questions out there and a lot of emotion tied around the ports are going to empty. You've heard that. And then the shelves are going to empty like they did in COVID. I'm sure you've heard that too. This video answers those questions via experts, including one gentleman who actually runs the LA port facility. So few people better than him to actually give you fact-based answers on shipping, the drop in shipping, where we're seeing it, what's happening with shipping from China, and on, but also answering questions about the tariff impact, not just on companies that can negotiate with the Trump administration. I'm talking the automotive industry, the Sam's Club, Walmart, Lowe's, et cetera, the big ones that can negotiate with the administration. Talking about the impact this is going to have on the mom and pop shops. How do these tariffs affect them? How are they affecting them? And then also, what is the impact going to be on us, those of us who go out there and buy these products? So it's a fascinating video, fact-based video from the experts. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we update U.S. ports as of May 4th, 2025. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So we're doing these periodic updates on what's going on with shipping regarding U.S. ports because of the tariffs initiated by the United States against countries around the world, but most importantly, China, which is currently sitting at 145%. Not for all goods, but largely 145%. Now, there's a lot of information floating around out there on mainstream media, on social media, on all the media platforms. Some good, but a whole lot of it is really, really bad because a lot of people don't know what they're looking at. They don't understand shipping. They're just finding it now. They've downloaded an app that shows them ships, and they don't quite understand it. I am a former merchant mariner. I sailed ships for a living. I worked ashore for a shipping firm. I then went into academia. I got a master's in maritime studies, a PhD in maritime history. I teach a course for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy entitled Maritime Industry Policy, and I also teach classes in maritime security and maritime history. So I know a little bit about this. I'm not perfect. I'm not the end-all, be-all. I make mistakes. Just go ask my wife. But I like to think I can provide you some level-headed assessment, and more importantly, I'll link you over to sources that you can go to verify what you're seeing out there. But today what I want to do is look at an interview done by Gene Soroka, the executive director of the Port of LA, a consummate professional. I mean, just a man who knows shipping in and out, probably one of the most experienced Americans out there when it comes to shipping. An interview he did with Bloomberg TV, and he hits on a couple of key points that I think are essential. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos as they come out.
Describe for us, let's take a beat, really frame it for us, how much volume has just dropped off in the last few weeks?
Yeah, about a third of the import volume, which means give or take about 50,000 20-foot equivalent units gone off the arrivals coming in next week.
From next week is when you expect to see this really hit?
That's correct, and that matches up. The announcement's back on April 2nd, then on April 8th, a little bit of a change on everybody, ex-China, Mexico, Canada.
Gene did this interview 2 days ago, and when you looked at the data he had at that time, this week, May 4th and May 10th, was showing a 35% drop across the Port of LA. The most recent data coming out of the Port of LA, this is their optimizer, their signal optimizer report. They put this out daily. It shows you estimated arrival of vessels and, more importantly, the number of containers coming in. It's showing for this week, week 19, May the 4th to 10th, instead of a 35% drop, it's showing a 24% drop. But what it also is showing is that some cargo drops are coming in much later too. So we're seeing 13% for the week of May 11th to 17th, and then a 13.5% drop from May 18th to May 24th. So if we're looking at anywhere between a 13% and 35% drop in container cargo, that is obviously significant. I am not undercutting that or trying to minimize that at all. However, it is important to put it into context. The Port of LA, this is the numbers for 2024. It shows you the tonnage of containerized imports coming into all the ports in the United States. At the very top there is LA. 51% of the containerized imports for 2024. If we're talking about a 13 to 35% drop in containerized imports coming into the port of LA, notice we are not talking about the full amount coming in from China. I think that is really significant. That tells me that cargo from China is still flowing into the United States. And that's for a variety of reasons. Number one, cargo has already been booked. You can't turn it around. It's getting loaded on ships. It's going to come this way. Second, even with a 145% tariff, there may be an issue that it's still cheaper to buy it from China than anywhere else. Manufacturing, you may not be able to replace that in any time frame soon enough so that you have to get it from China. And then lastly, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, it may be held in ports or in warehouses until the tariffs come down. We're going to explain that a little bit more in a minute.
Just wondering how you're anticipating this rolls and ripples through the economy from here, how it hits trucking, when this turns up on the shelf. What's the distance, the time from when you see a drop-off in volume and when we, as consumers, see the shortages?
Right. So CEOs are telling me, hit the pause button, right? I'm not going to import anymore at these kind of prices. Let's wait and see. I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 weeks till I get some clarity. Then hiring. Off the table for right now. Capital investment, pause. And the retailers are telling me that realistically, with even the 10%, I'm going to have to pass it on to the consumers.
Again, I think Gene's assessment spot on. You're seeing this issue. So companies are holding, basically shutting everything down in terms of capital investments. There's labor issues. Where this is going to hit first, in particularly, is going to be in transportation. Particularly, you're going to see a slowdown in the U.S. ports. We're seeing it already on the West Coast. Seattle is not closed. Tacoma is not closed. You got people posting that like crazy. It's not happening, but there is a slowdown. I had posted a picture the other day. A friend of mine ship coming out of Shanghai, and it's lighter loaded than usual. That's what we're seeing. We're going to see a slowdown in dock workers and their ability to get work on the docks. And more importantly, short haul trucking and long haul trucking is going to be the ones most affected. We're definitely going to see that. Interesting enough, we're seeing an uptick in rail right now, which means a lot of cargo is being put on rail to move. And we're seeing the truckers really taking the brunt of this.
So how much is this really coming from all over? It's not just about China. This is about really global trade coming to a standstill until there is a much greater degree of certainty and a much lower tariff rate than even the baseline that's been put out there.
Yeah. Can I just take a moment here and highlight the fact that news commentator sat there and said global trade is coming to a standstill? That is grossly incorrect. I mean, you're a Bloomberg reporter. Don't say that. You cause a little bit of panic when you say that. Trade is slowing down. Granted, it is slowing down from China to the United States in particularly. We're going to see that. We're seeing the slowdown on the West Coast. We'll see it hit the East and Gulf Coast by mid-May. Second, third week in May, you'll see it because it takes longer for the ships to go around Africa to get to the United States. But don't sit there and say it's at a standstill. That's not accurate at all.
Global trade's going to slow, economies will follow, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Back in November, so many of us were wringing our hands about 4% inflation. We've just added 10 percentage points to imports coming out of Southeast Asia for our port, and these unbelievable numbers out of China.
The inflation issue is a big one. We're going to see added costs. Understand, back in Trump 1.0 tariffs, when those tariffs went into effect, they were pretty mitigated by a lot of factors, not the least of which China moved some production offshore so that they were coming out of Vietnam, out of other countries. We also saw that the tariffs were kind of lowered at different points, plus some of the transportation costs were eaten by the shippers. But that's not the case here. You can't swallow a 145% tariff. That is going to be shared. And one of the interesting things to note is how that's going to impact U.S. manufacturing, because when U.S. manufacturing is dependent on components principally coming from China, that's going to be built into U.S. manufacturing costs.
How much are you going to see a real decline in dock workers if this goes on?
Yeah, this is the question. So the trucker hauling 4 or 5 containers today, next week, she probably hauls 2 or 3. The dock workers are no longer going to see overtime and double shifts. They're going to probably work less than a traditional work week, starting right off the bat. Every 4 containers mean a job. So when we start dialing this back, it's less job opportunity.
So that stat right there, I think, is one of the key ones that Gene talks about. Every 4 containers less coming in the port is 1 less short haul drayage driver, because they can usually do 3 to 4 containers a day. That is significant. You're going to see dock workers who are not going to be employed. Now, everyone's screaming at the the screen right now, Sal, this is why they need to go with automation and not use these damn dock workers. First off, the West Coast, Port of LA has one of the most automated ports in the country. APM terminal is automated. Tray Pack has automation. The West Coast has automation. Understand, the shipping companies wanted automation in one area in the United States, and they wanted to go into the biggest ports in the country to put automation. And that's why they went into LA and Long Beach and automated the crap out of the ports, so that they can do this. The other thing, the reason they didn't want automation in other ports is so that they don't have to pay dock workers when things slow down like this. So they can just slow down the ports and not have to pay. And so when everybody's screaming about dock workers, put that in the back of your mind.
And what happens if we get a deal?
If we get a deal, it's going to take about a month. Let me walk you through that real quick. About 2 weeks to get the ships repositioned around these major ports, from Qingdao to Shanghai to Xiamen, load up all those containers, and then another 2 weeks to steam across the Pacific to get to us. This is important because now we're talking about spring and summer fashion. So we're kind of at a crux here that we've got to have something pretty quick.
So that's the other part that we're not talking about a lot. Should the tariffs come down? Should they go away? Should they be reduced? Should we get the bullwhip effect, whereby all of a sudden the ports are wide open and shipments start flowing across the Pacific to the United States? It's going to take time. It's going to take time to reset, to reposition the ships, and then to come in. I want to note a couple of things that Gene did not put in here. Number one, we're just seeing right now a big reshuffle in the large container companies and their alliance system. Shipping companies, the top 10 shipping companies in the world, control 85% of all the containers afloat. They do it in 4 big alliances. Well, those change in February of 2025. And so they're reshuffling ships on their route. So they're all busy trying to readjust that. Second, because of the proposed fees on Chinese-built and Chinese-owned ships, one of the things we're going to see is some companies are going to start pulling those Chinese-built ships off U.S. service. And this gives them an opportunity to do that. They can gap a sailing. They can what's called blanket sailing, not actually do a scheduled sailing, and they can reposition. But the fear here is that if the tariffs go away, let's say June 1st, you're going to have a huge influx of cargo coming in, and we may overload the ports to refill the warehouse space that has been depleted now over the past. Gene estimates that a lot of companies have anywhere from 5 to 7 weeks worth of warehouse supplies stored up prior to the initiation of the tariffs. Now we'll see a big, huge influx, and what we may see is something similar to we saw in 2021, where we had a massive ships come into the United States, but the intermodal system within the United States, the docks, the ports, the rail, the trucking, all the infrastructure inside the United States cannot handle that huge influx. That's a big danger we should be thinking about.
We have a story out, it was anecdotal reporting as well. We've heard about China quietly starting to exempt about a quarter of U.S. imports. Are any U.S. importers exempting Chinese tariffs? Is there a way to get around the 145%?
Not really. There may be some exceptions, Anne-Marie, maybe a little bit going north or south of us, but realistically speaking, nobody is out there talking a lot about, hey, I got a better deal coming out of China right now.
So getting around the tariff, I want to talk about this because I got recommended over to a video here over at F-Stoppers. One right here, why Trump's tariffs hasn't affected us yet. He imports bottles for a hot sauce company that he runs, and the bottles come from China. And what was interesting is he was facing the issue of having to pay tariffs on it. First off, the tariff wasn't clear to him for a variety of reasons. When his bottles arrived, the tariff was only at 45% because the tariff is affixed based on the date you loaded it in China. And he was basically given that tariff at the point before it escalated up to 145%. But you do have some options when the cargo lands in the United States. Let me walk through these real quick because a lot of people are asking about this. When a cargo lands in a port in the United States, you're given so many what's called free days. In other words, how many days you can leave the container on the port in the terminal. And it's anywhere from 1 to 9 to most cases. And you usually have a set amount of times. If you leave it on the port longer than that, then you get charged what's called demurrage. It's like a holding fee. You get paid, it's a late fee to getting it off the terminal. But you do not pay the tariff until you pick the container up and take it off the terminal. It will not leave the terminal until the tariff is either paid or you secure a bond for it. If you secure the bond for it, then you're going to pay it over time, but you've put collateral up against it. The other option is it can be moved off the terminal to a bonded warehouse where it'll be held in the bonded warehouse until you claim it, and then you pay the tariff as of that day. So if the tariff goes down, you get a lower price for it. The problem is there's finite amount of bonded warehouses out there. A lot of them are full of cargo right now, and so there's a lot of issues with it. The other option you have is to ship it back to China or wherever you got it from, but that's on you to go ahead and ship it back, and will they accept the cargo back for it? Also, I should mention that if you pull it off the terminal and then you hold it and you don't open it in that bonded warehouse, you will pay a detention fee for keeping the container late. So, I mean, there's a lot of fees associated here. A lot of companies are trying to do this too through Canada and Mexico. They're offloading their cargo in Canada and Mexico. Understand, if you come through Canada and Mexico, you're still going to get charged the China tariff. They don't charge it from what country it's immediately coming from. It's where the cargo originated. They're holding it in Canada and Mexico, waiting for the cargo tariff to go down. Then they can stream it across the border. So there's a lot of issues at play here. You have got to pay this tariff, and companies are already seeing that. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, will levy that tariff. You'll see it almost immediately.
The Flexport CEO joined us earlier in the week, and he said ocean freight is down 60% from China. When do we see 100%?
Good question. It depends on how long this goes. We heard the reports overnight through Bloomberg that the folks in China are thinking about talking. What does that mean? Okay, great, but we've got to get a move on here.
So they're referencing Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport. There's a big article about Flexport and Ryan Peterson over in the Wall Street Journal. We've been talking to each other since the Ever Given in the Suez back in 2021 when I started my channel, as a matter of fact. And I kind of don't like the hyperbole, so to speak. I like Ryan. I know a lot of people. He's a very polarizing figure in many ways. But there's a statement here I want to highlight. Peterson is explaining to anyone who will listen why hefty U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports could be catastrophic for America's small businesses. Quote, if they don't change the tariffs, it's going to be an extinction-level asteroid wiping out the dinosaurs kind of event. Only these aren't dinosaurs. These are dynamic, healthy businesses. Okay, I think that's a little bit on the extreme side. I understand what he means. Small businesses have very thin margins. They cannot absorb these costs like larger companies can. 100% agree with that. However, I think you gotta be careful about creating the issue here of a little bit of panic in some ways. Companies are dealing with this. Smaller companies who are shipping over finished products that are ready to go, are going to have to pay 145% on that total element. If you are like F-Stoppers and you're just shipping over the bottle the hot sauce goes in, that's only a portion of the overall cost of that product. They are more likely to be able to consume that cost and transfer it on to the consumer. So I think we have to have a little bit of care. We have to be a little more careful in some of our statements. Now, I will agree with Ryan here. The more companies that Peterson spoke with, the more he felt that he needed to speak up for them. Quote, it was just very obvious that they felt really helpless and that nobody was explaining their point of view. Nobody had their back. And so he has spent the past week in Washington, D.C. kind of explaining the impact tariffs are having. I think Ryan is exactly right about that. I think that the big companies, the corporations, the CEOs of Walmart and Target are able to get in with Trump. If you are a small business owner, you don't have that ability to do that. And again, we're not articulating correctly the impact this is having. One of the reasons I'm doing this channel is to talk about this impact that we're seeing. All right, let's go back to Gene.
When do we see 100%?
Good question. It depends on how long this goes.
So I think Gene's statement there is really important. Again, why are we talking about 100%? There's no way we have 100% no cargo coming from China. It's unrealistic. It's not going to happen. Even with 145% tariff, we're still going to get shipments out of China. And if you look at Gene's numbers, we're seeing that right now. And understand, we haven't seen it yet on the East and Gulf Coast ports yet. Back to this chart and the talk about, for example, the Port of Newark is empty. Well, the Port of Newark is not empty. Newark only receives 23% of its cargo from China. Savannah only gets 29% of its cargo from China. Houston only receives 25% of its cargo from China. Those are the three biggest ports on the East and Gulf Coast ports. So you're talking about a quarter to maybe a third of the cargo coming in. We're not going to see a precipitous, emptying of the ports. What we are going to see is efforts being done to shift cargo sources out of China to other places. We're also going to try to see some getting around this. I mean, we're going to see some cargo moved around through ports, trying to mask it and where it's coming from. So, I mean, that's another element we haven't even gotten into yet. So what are my big takeaways? First, consumers will see prices increase due to the tariffs and because of the increased warehouse costs caused by the front loading of cargo during the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. Second, any change in the tariffs will cause more disruptions, including a reduction in them. I mean, even if we reduce the tariffs, we're going to see disruptions. There's no question about that. Third, this is hitting the West Coast this week. It will hit the East and Gulf Coast in 2 weeks. Fourth, ships are still sailing from China and ports are still seeing ship arrivals, but at lower levels and ships coming in lighter. And then finally, the other question should be, how will this impact U.S. exports, grain, energy, and manufactured goods? I will probably tackle that last one, exports, in an upcoming video because it's a very complicated subject. I need to make sure I have all my data on it, on grain, on bulk, on oil, on LNG. All that really needs to be covered. If you want to catch and really understand what's going on in the ports, not just right now, but historically speaking, let me recommend one site to you. And that is the IMF Port Watch, a great site for a variety of issues. Use this a lot for tracking the Red Sea and what was happening with the diversions. If you go to Port Monitor in the IMF Port Watch, you can type in the name of a port. It will come up. For example, here is LA and Long Beach. You'll see some data on it. What are the three biggest traded industries? What share of the economy is imports, exports? But then you get data like this, which I think is really the key here. You get port calls. For example, this is the port calls over the past year. So are we seeing reductions in port calls? You'll see right here, this is the data for April 24th. Now it's lagging a bit. It's going to take a week or two for the data to be accumulated. But on April 24th, the 7-day average was 12 vessels. Over the past 7 days prior to that, there were 10 vessels in port. So a little bit of a reduction. But then you could do the same thing for import volume. So are we seeing the same import volume? Again, this is as of April 25th. The average is 556,000 tons. We saw 540,000 tons coming in. And then export, same thing. You can see it here. Now notice it moves in kind of spurts here. It's not a constant kind of steady flow. And this is why looking at the 7-day average is really important here. Exports, we see the export volume here is 825,000. The 7-day average was 532,000. But again, if you look at exports here, it depends on the number of ships that are leaving at any given time. So hopefully this gives you a good picture of what's going on. I thought Gene's statement was really good with some caveats in there, but I just can't recommend enough taking a moment and not taking for granted what some people are posting on social media and even in the mainstream media. Just take a moment and really try to look at it. I'll put a Q&A, a pinned Q&A below, so if you have questions about that, feel free to ask about it. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. A real big shout out to the roughly 50,000 new subscribers I picked up over the past week. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for subscribing. Please take a moment, share this with your friends, put it out on social media. Let's see if we can get this up a little bit, heading toward 500,000 subscribers. Just absolutely crazy. Started this 4 years ago with 137 subscribers, so it's been a crazy ride. But thank you so much. Hey, subscribe, hit the bell. Give it a big thumbs up, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you support the page? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below where you can contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Until our next port update, or just news here at What's Going On with Shipping, this is Sal, signing off.
I hope you all got a lot out of that video. I really do. I hope it answers so many questions that you have and that all of us have. The impact of these tariffs on, amongst other things, shipping, the shelves, inventory status, and of course, what we pay. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Want to see more like this? Please subscribe. And if you know somebody who is also concerned about these shipping updates and the status of the ports, share it with them. It certainly helps get the word out. As always, until next time, God bless. Love you all.